There's something strange, but strangely beautiful, about the backroads of Kentucky. The dusty lanes, the old tobacco fields left to wither, the faded signs marking towns no one really remembers. These places used to be alive. Coal mines working around the clock. Ports buzzing with people chasing a living. Now, all that remains are crumbling buildings and stories that grow fainter with time. And yet, that's where their charm lies. These aren't just abandoned towns. They're like time capsules, frozen somewhere between the past and whatever comes next. From Paradise, a town literally wiped off the map, to the West Kentucky Raceway that stalled in its prime, each place has its own way of hanging on. This isn't just a list of ghost towns. It's a collection of lives once lived, still whispering through empty streets. It sounds like a town pulled from a dream, but the story of Paradise ends in tragedy. Once a peaceful community on the banks of the Green River in Muhlenberg County, it was a quiet place of tobacco fields and wooden houses. That changed in the 1960s, when the Tennessee Valley Authority built a massive coal-fired power plant right next door. The air thickened with smoke, the water grew toxic, and life became impossible. Eventually, every resident was relocated. Ironically, the town called Paradise was sacrificed in the name of progress and electricity. Today, nothing is left, just a weathered sign by the road and a song. John Prine's Paradise turned the town into a legend, remembered not for its buildings, but for the memory industry couldn't destroy. There's a strange stillness in Blue Heron, a mining town that once thrummed with life beneath the earth, now left echoing between the cliffs of the Big South Fork. Built in 1937 by the Stearns Coal and Lumber Company, it had everything. Rows of miner homes, a small church, even the rumble of trains hauling coal out day and night. But when the mine shut down in 1962, the town fell silent almost overnight. The people left, but the place didn't vanish completely. It was rebuilt, not as a town, but as a ghostly tribute. Wooden frames and skeletal steel structures now stand as open-air exhibits, part of the Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area. They don't shelter life anymore, but they still hold a memory. Tucked in the foothills of the Cumberland Mountains sits Lynch, once known as Kentucky's Black Diamond. Built in 1917 by U.S. Steel, it was a model coal town, home to over 10,000 people from around the world. Italians, Hungarians, African Americans, Poles. It had its own movie theater, a hospital, electricity, when most of the region still lived by lamplight. But behind the town's promise was the brutal grind of coal mining, dangerous, exhausting, and unforgiving. When the industry began to collapse in the 1960s, Lynch faded too. The stores closed, the homes emptied, and a thick layer of coal dust settled on what was once a grand vision of progress. Today, you can still walk its streets. The ghosts don't talk, but you can almost hear what they'd say. If Lynch was the face of Kentucky's coal industry, Harlan was its pulse, the place where labor turned into rebellion. In the 1930s, this quiet Appalachian town became the center of a storm now known as Bloody Harlan, one of the most violent labor uprisings in American history. Miners demanded fair wages and the right to unionize, but the coal companies met them with force. Armed guards, tear gas, and gunfire became part of daily life. But out of that chaos came something more lasting, a spirit of resistance that refused to die. Harlan's story was carried forward in protest songs, books, and documentaries. Today, it's a quieter place, but beneath the Appalachian mist, you can still feel the echoes of a town that once stood its ground. Tucked along the banks of the Cumberland River, Creelsboro was once a river town bustling with trade and energy. In the 1800s, it served as a vital outpost in southern Kentucky, where general stores filled the streets, livestock markets crowded the fields, and steamboats pulled up to its docks carrying goods and people from far-off places. But as modern roads and rail lines pushed the river aside, Creelsboro slowly faded from the map. Today, only a handful of aging homes and the remnants of its old dock remain. The town breathes a soft kind of nostalgia, like a page of history left open. Just outside town, the massive Creelsboro Natural Arch rises nearly 130 feet above the forest floor. It's a silent monument of stone, standing strong even as the town around it gently slips into memory. Along another bend of the Cumberland, Mill Springs holds a story not just of history, but of blood, sacrifice, and quiet courage. In January 1862, it was the site of one of the earliest significant Union victories in the Western theater of the American Civil War. Soldiers fought through torrential rain and heavy fog, their rifles crackling through the fields and forest. The land, now peaceful, once echoed with the clash of bayonets and the cries of the wounded. After the war, the area returned to a quieter rhythm. Gristmills turned grain into flour, and life carried on. But Mill Springs never forgot. Today, the battlefield is preserved as a national site. Visitors can walk among weathered headstones and rolling hills, where silence has returned, but the gravity of what happened still lingers in the soil. Nestled in the rolling hills of Edmonson County, Rocky Hill feels like a photograph that never developed, faded, quiet, and suspended in time. Once a thriving farming town built around the rhythm of trains and tobacco harvests, it now draws a different kind of visitor. Photographers and wanderers searching for the poetry of abandonment. Old wooden houses lean into the breeze. Storefronts with peeling signs whisper stories no one quite remembers. And gravel roads stretch into the silence. Back in its prime, Rocky Hill was a hub for shipping Kentucky staples. Corn, livestock, tobacco, out to the wider world. But when the trade route shifted, the life slowly followed. What's left isn't empty, it's resting, in the way old towns do when they know they're still being watched. It's a name that sounds odd at first, Gravel Switch, but that's part of its charm. Tucked into Marion County, this small town owes its entire existence to a railroad junction where gravel cars were diverted, giving the town its unusual name. In the late 1800s, it was a key stop for transporting limestone, farm goods, and whiskey barrels. Fitting, since the legendary Maker's Mark bourbon was born just down the road. As highways overtook railroads, Gravel Switch began to quiet. The train slowed, then stopped. Today, all that remains are rusted tracks, aging farmhouses, and a soft echo of clinking bourbon bottles from long ago. But that echo is warm. In Gravel Switch, history isn't forgotten. It's simply aged like the bourbon it helped birth. Way out in western Kentucky, the town of Marion once pulsed with the deep rhythm of mining. It was the heart of America's fluorspar industry, a strange and beautiful mineral with a purple-green glow, essential for making steel and glass. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, thousands worked the mines around Crittenden County, and Marion buzzed with lights, machines, and miners' boots echoing on stone floors. But global markets shifted. Synthetic alternatives arrived. One by one, the mines closed, leaving only dust, deep pits, and roads that forget where they once led. Yet Marion didn't disappear. The town still honors its mining legacy at the Ben E. Clement Mineral Museum, where gleaming crystals and mining tools sit under soft light, silent witnesses to a time when Marion was carved from rock and lit by grit. Once a vital river port, Smithland sat proudly where the Cumberland meets the Ohio River, a natural crossroads that powered Kentucky's economy in the 19th century. Paddle boats came and went, hauling timber, coal, and produce from the heartland to major markets in Louisville and St. Louis. The town's main street thrived, lined with bustling hotels, warehouses, and stately Victorian homes that faced the water like sentinels of prosperity. But like many towns tied to river trade, Smithland's lifeblood began to fade when railroads and highways took the lead. Bit by bit, the commerce slowed, the people moved on, and the docks grew quiet. Today, what remains is a collection of elegant old homes, a silent riverfront, and the distant cry of gulls echoing off buildings that remember what once was. You might not hear its name often now, but Blandville was once the beating heart of Ballard County. Founded in 1842 and serving as the county seat until 1881, this quiet town was once a hub for lumber and farm trade. Ox carts and wagons rolled through its dusty streets, and steam from the nearby riverboats was a familiar sight. But the shifting tides of transportation, railroads, better roads, and deeper ports pulled commerce away. The economy faded, and so did the town's prominence. Still, Blandville endures in its own quiet way. Fewer than 150 people remain, yet the town preserves antebellum homes and old storefronts like pages in a living book. Walking through its narrow lanes feels like stepping across decades, where time hasn't stopped, but it certainly slowed down to a whisper. A name that sounds like it belongs in a poem, Lovelaceville wears its charm with humble grace. Settled in the mid-1800s, it once served as a lively stopover for farmers and traders on their way to Paducah's markets. A church, a general store, a small schoolhouse. These were the pillars of daily life, where neighbors gathered and stories grew as tall as the corn stalks that lined the fields. But like so many small farming towns, its pulse faded with the rise of agribusiness and the rerouting of regional trade. Today, Lovelaceville is a quiet scatter of wide-porched homes, a few fields still under cultivation, and long stretches of road where silence rolls in like morning fog. The name still lingers sweetly in the air, but these days, it feels more like a memory spoken softly than a place calling you in. Lowe's was never a bustling metropolis, but for a long time, it pulsed with the quiet rhythm of rural southern life. Tucked into Graves County, this small farming town was once known for its fertile fields of tobacco and corn. Freight trains would make regular stops to carry local harvests to distant markets. Life revolved around the church, the schoolhouse, and a Crossroads general store, three simple anchors that formed the heart of a close-knit community. But as farming became mechanized and rail lines were decommissioned, young people began to leave in search of work elsewhere. What remains today is a soft echo of that earlier life. Faded buildings still stand, not as centers of activity, but as markers of a time when things moved slower and neighbors leaned on each other more. You won't find Lawton on most travel maps, and that's exactly what gives it charm. Tucked away in Elliott County, this forgotten town once came to life thanks to coal mining and the train lines that carried black rock out to the world. When the mines closed in the mid-20th century, so too did the heartbeat of Lawton. Families moved on, and the small rail station and rows of wooden houses were slowly reclaimed by weeds and silence. Local lore whispers of nearby limestone caves once used by moonshiners and bootleggers during Prohibition, when making and selling alcohol was illegal, but never truly stopped. Today, Lawton has become a hidden gem for photographers and history lovers. In its overgrowth and stillness, there's something hauntingly beautiful. The remnants of its mining past still speak, in their own quiet way, of Kentucky's rougher, grittier chapters. West Kentucky Raceway makes for a fitting final stop in our journey through Kentucky's forgotten places. Unlike the old mining towns or fading river ports, this one isn't from the distant past. It's modern, and that's what makes it so striking. Not long ago, this dirt track roared to life every weekend. Engines screamed, dust rose high, and the crowd cheered as local drivers competed under floodlights and wide Kentucky skies. But rising costs and waning interest slowly took the thrill out of the race. The track closed, the grandstands rusted, and the surface cracked under years of disuse. Now, silence has taken pole position. Ironically, at a place once defined by speed and adrenaline, time seems to have hit the brakes. West Kentucky Raceway reminds us that not all ghost towns are ancient. Some are modern ruins, and their silence cuts just as deep.